to buy gold with those geopolitical risks. Gold had its best week last week, Manis, since March of this year.
You're giving me a hint for what to do with the dollars and buy. It's nearly Christmas, Dani. But anyway, coming up, we're going to talk politics.
And I'm Dani Berger in London. Here's what you need to know. President Biden is set to visit Israel tomorrow, then travel to Jordan for talks in what's being called a critical moment for the region and for the world. Meanwhile, on Capitol Hill, Representative Jim Jordan edges closer to becoming the next U.S. House Speaker, but a band of Republican holdouts continue to threaten his bid. And Russia's Vladimir Putin arrives in China on a rare international trip for talks with Xi Jinping. The U.S. presses Beijing to help reduce tensions in the Middle East. Now, a more calm equity market to slightly lower after yesterday, despite the fact we had bond yields, 10-year yields go back above 4.7%. We had equities gain more than 1%. It was a strange day, capped by Marko Klanovic, for example, saying it's time to reduce risk. Despite that, S&P and NASDAQ futures down about 0.2%. We're on the cusp of big tech earnings, ones that Bloomberg Intelligence figures will help lift this overall S&P 500 benchmark. That's going to kick off with both Netflix and Tesla on Wednesday. Meanwhile, European stocks, Manis, just slightly higher following the Asia session higher. You broke the ZEW numbers earlier, better than expected coming out of that German investor survey. That does seem to have slightly lifted European equities.
And don't forget, Union Bunker Privé yesterday said to us, we're already in a policy mistake in Europe. Diplomacy is what the world is looking at, and the bond market is trying to front run.
From Country Garden, what do we know about what happens next? Do we even know exactly when this deadline is anyway?
Well, we don't have a specific time. The clock is ticking, 17th or 18th, so we're very, very close to that, obviously. It's a debt payment of just 15.
Also looking forward to see you break down that data on your show, Bloomberg Markets Today. That is Tom McKenzie. Thank you very much. All right, Manis, some breaking news to bring to our viewers. The private equity giant CVC Capital is said to near a kickoff of a mega private equity IPO. This rumor has been swirling around for at least the past year, Manis, but we know the conditions to IPO have not been very good. We, of course, were speaking with earlier this month with KKR's Philip Freisa, who said that for those who want to IPO, there might be a window of opportunity coming up. For CVC, according to people familiar, that window might be this coming November.
You know, this is the happiest I've seen you since we launched this show. It's like you just light up as soon as private equity news comes up or anything. I mean, just to put it in context, I know, there you go, $160 billion is what they manage, Dani, and they raised, what, $26 billion back in July. That was the world's biggest ever buyout fund. The valuation is going to be key, because we've seen a lot of IPO flops, but this is a very different beast. It's not a retail, it's not a go shopping, it's not a retail product. This is the absolute guts and bones of finance. So it's valued at, what's the number?
Yeah. $15 billion. At least that's what it was valued when it's big. Manis, you know why else you should be excited about this? Because CVC was really the first private equity fund to prove that you could invest in sports and make money from it. They did it in F1. See, there's a sports hook in here. You
got it in there. I think the problem is, of course, the Saudis and the Emiratis come along with a much bigger swag bag, and they go, yeah, we'll have a bit of that, thanks.
True. All right. Well, looking forward to keeping everyone updated on this one. All right. Coming up first, though, we're going to take a look at some of the market-moving events to watch throughout the day. Critical support in his bid for House Speaker. Joining us now is our very own Kriti Gupta. Kriti, great to talk to you. Great to have you on Bloomberg Brief. All right. Jim Jordan, how close is he to becoming Speaker at this point?
Very close and very far at the same time. And let me explain here. Look, Jim Jordan is the very controversial GOP candidate. He was endorsed by President Trump. His politics are thought of as very, very far right. So on kind of this last Hail Mary that you're seeing from the Republicans, this is kind of their last shot. And he is going around. He's making the concessions specifically around defense spending, which seem to be, of course, of all the more importance given the Israel-Hamas conflict as well. So he is actually getting close in terms of rallying his support. That being said, it only takes 4 people to vote against him that Hakeem Jeffries, then of the Democratic Party, takes over as Speaker. So again, it's a very slim win if he does win, but on track to get there at the moment.
Pretty good to see. A very colourful imagery there. The last Hail Mary, but pro-defence spending. How will that play into the Israel aid?
Well, I think the number you need to know, Manis, is $3 billion. That's how much annually the U.S. contributes to Israeli defense aid at the moment. The question is how much more. You're already seeing President Biden kind of move some of his actual warships over to the area that is under presidential direction, for lack of a better term. But what you still need is that congressional spending mostly on the humanitarian side, less on the defense side. And that's where the House Speaker really needs to kind of come to some sort of fruition, because that is the part where you actually need the votes to come through. And again, the Republicans will actually support that bid, given that they are historically pro-defense spending. So that's not really the issue. But again, it is kind of all held up in Congress in a similar way that Ukrainian aid is. The difference is that Israel is actually a close American ally, whereas Ukraine isn't.
Well, in the meantime, you have President Biden, who's set to visit Israel, is set to visit Jordan. Is this about politics? Is this about acting as a broker of sorts? What's the hope that the White House is getting out of this?
Well, the word I've been hearing a lot is deterrent. And the idea here simply being that's not just about Antony Blinken. They're quite literally bringing out the bigger players. And remember, this is the second time that President Biden has visited an active war zone. He did it in Ukraine, in Kiev. Political strategists are saying that the longer there is a U.S. official in the area, the longer the ground offensive will be held off. But again, there is also talk about humanitarian aid, convincing Egypt to take on a more kind of humanitarian approach when they're really hesitating to take on more refugees. Perhaps President Biden is kind of the convincing factor.
Okay, Kriti, thank you very much. And at the same time, you have Putin talking to those Middle East leaders as well, trying to build that narrative around a consensus for some kind of a ceasefire. So it is a real global approach at this juncture. Kriti Gupta covering the very latest on President Biden.